Welcome to CGT Square Talk, where top experts in the industry share their groundbreaking journeys. Brought to you by Blue Squared, your strategic digital partner.
Third and Howard. Third and
Yeah.
Michelle.
Art,
Hey,
how are you?
good.
Good to see
Hello,
you.
Art.
Hey,
Art, do you know
Armin.
Armin? I don't know if you guys have met.
I don't
Armin,
think we've met, have we?
he
Armin?
kind
I
of
don't think
runs
so.
our customer success for North America, and he's kind of a
Oh, okay.
validation testing guru. So,
Hello,
Right on.
Art. It's really good to meet you.
Good to meet you guys. Well,
So I'm
actually, I
gonna-
don't know, but good to meet you, Armin.
welcome. Good to see you. Hey, I know it's been a little bit since we chatted, and I thought it might be interesting. I know you've had kind of an interesting history. You kind of started as an engineer, kind of worked your way through a couple of different industries, but really focused a lot on the pharma side and ended up
Yeah.
kind of really as a IT executive. And maybe you can share a little bit about your journey and how you got from point A to point B and how all that
Yeah,
went.
sure. Yeah. You read my LinkedIn profile, I guess, huh, Anthony? But anyway.
Oh, we have people that are looking all over for
We have
information
people.
on you, man.
Yeah. But no, yeah. So I did. I graduated with an engineering degree. I actually started working as a sales engineer. And I won't even tell you the year I graduated, but it was a while ago. Let's leave it at that. And I started working for a very small pump company as a sales engineer, essentially working with larger equipment manufacturers to use our pumps as a component within their broader, whatever it happened to be, air sampling equipment, other types of, they're really small pumps for pumping either fluids or vapor. But anyway, I did that for a small amount of time, but I always had an aptitude for software, even in my studies of engineering. I didn't necessarily minor, but I took quite a few programming. We called it programming back then, programming courses, and I had an aptitude for
Right.
doing some coding, programming. And I joined a really small software company shortly after joining that pump company that I mentioned earlier. And I actually was hired in as a sales engineer, application engineer, we called it at the time, where I'd be working with very small furniture or cabinet manufacturers to not only sell in our software, but actually install it and customize it for their particular business model. It was kind of an interesting software. It would help them. You may have seen it if you've had a kitchen design recently. It helped them design their kitchen layout.
Mhm.
It also helped the manufacturer know how to cut the parts out of a sheet of plywood or sheet good, if you will, 4x8 sheet. So they optimize their materials for creating a particular cabinet. And it's kind of interesting. It was a neat little math problem to do that, because you can't just place the parts on a particular sheet because the way the saw blade works. So you'd have to optimize it, cutting it end to end, but then still having enough material to cut the next piece. But then also there's labor costs that you need to factor in. So it was actually kind of an interesting bit of software. But anyway, I developed a real aptitude for working with real paying customers using our software to manage their very small business. So it wasn't, the scale of dollars that you see in today's world, especially in some of the larger companies I've worked with, was nowhere near that scale. I mean, they were really counting every dollar and making sure every dollar counted to help make their business more efficiently. But it really helped me get an appreciation for how technology, software in particular, could really help a small business, or any business for that matter, become way more efficient and more effective in what they were trying to do by leveraging technology to optimize things. So it was really an interest, and also developed a solid customer service experience, because working with these people in their small business, their livelihood depended on it. They didn't have a lot of money to waste, so every dollar counted, as I mentioned earlier. So we really worked very closely together to make sure we squeezed as much value out of the software we were implementing for them as we possibly could.
So you kind of were on both ends. You kind of helped build it, and then you helped implement it.
Yeah,
right?
exactly. Yeah,
Wow.
precisely. Yeah, and that I started helping implement it, but it was a really small software company. So I started to wear many hats, and I started to, after that application or sales engineer experience, I started to do some software development as well. And that's where I sort of really got ingrained in how software gets created, how it gets developed, tested, deployed, et cetera. So that's it was a really good, I think, broad base of learning how to both leverage software for a broader business need, not just for software's sake, so to speak, but also start to learn how to be hands-on in developing the code itself.
That's actually awesome because you get to have the customer feedback as implementing a piece of software and then going back and actually developing
Right
a
on.
solution.
And they were not shy about providing that feedback.
Oh yeah, I bet. I bet.
Yeah.
So how did you get to like Merck and
Yeah,
into the whole
so-
pharma side of the world?
It's it's I don't know, just fate maybe. But so I was at that small software company for some time, and I was at a position where I felt like in order to grow my career, I needed to start to explore larger companies. I mean, I basically was reporting into the owner of the company, so there really wasn't far for me to progress in my career and also gain additional professional experiences as managing people, being part of a broader organization, et cetera. So I actually took a job with an elevator company. Schindler Elevator had I touch on every industry here. Schindler Elevator had a U.S. headquarters in New Jersey where I live, and I took on a role of again, actually doing more coding now, coding different types of programs, both for creating, actually would help a building estimator when they're creating a large high rise, estimate how much of an elevator, so to speak, they would need. And so if there's tracks or rails or how much capacity they want to carry, there's a lot of parameters you might not realize that go into actually both creating the elevator and the parts, but also estimating how much it might cost to add it to your building. So it's kind of an interesting little piece of software we built in Visual Basic, and our salespeople would be sitting next to the architect or the contractor who's building the commercial building, and actually entering in various parameters, number of floors, how many people, with a capacity in pounds, and it would spit out essentially what a potential elevator, either a traction elevator, which has the counterweights, if you might notice, as well, or a hydraulic, which has a giant piston that pushes.
It strikes me that your engineering background really helped with at least these two.
I think that one definitely that attracted me to this one in particular when I was interviewing, because of all the mechanical nature of what goes into creating an elevator, and the safety factors and the weights and the counterbalances and leveraging gravity. All that is kind of an interesting thing for an engineer. It might be a little bit nerdy, sorry, but for an engineer, all those different things you need to think about.
Yeah.
When you create a safe and effective elevator, it's really interesting. Yeah.
It makes me think, so obviously from there you got into the pharma side, but it makes me think is that
get into that, Anthony, don't worry.
No, I know, but it makes me think that it's so interesting, because I have kind of a similar background where I did a lot of different things, and I personally think it kind of helped me do what I can do now. But I wonder if the opportunities are there today for people to kind of, like you said, you were helping people cut plywood, and then you did elevators, and then you got to, I know now when people are looking for folks in cell and gene, whether it's IT or business side, they get very specific. And I wonder if the opportunity is still there, like it was for you to be able to kind of get these different types of experience.
Yeah, it's a good point. Well, to get into pharma, so I went from the elevator company over to Merck, as you pointed out. And it was because I had Visual Basic programming and leadership experience developing Visual Basic. It wasn't because I had a deep pharma background. I had none, actually. But they were looking for somebody who had that expertise in Visual Basic in particular. And that's how I sort of gained that employment at Merck. So it's an interesting thing. So is that, nowadays are companies looking for people that have relevant industry experience as well as the technical expertise?
Right.
To your sort of question earlier, Anthony, that's the part I don't know, is that opportunity. As a hiring manager, I know we often look for people with experience in our particular industry. And now sort of reflecting back upon my own background, maybe, a hiring manager should consider people with broader experiences, because I think there is a lot of applicability from industry to industry, and actually new ways of thinking from a different industry than your own industry that actually can add a lot of value that you may not have realized otherwise.
I think that's a really great point. Yeah. Sorry, Armin.
Yeah, you may have. So one of the things that I've noticed before is that people who are sticking with the same industry and have a lot of experience within an industry, they sort of have their own blinders on, kind of when they're approaching problems, day-to-day problem solving and stuff like that. So when you have somebody that is coming in with a broad experiences through different industries, you might have, somebody who's very creative in the way that they approach a problem solving. So that could be very interesting too. So
yeah, no,
creativity.
I've even seen it. And so from Merck, I actually joined Wyeth Consumer Goods. So there was a lot of pharmaceutical learnings that could be applied to the consumer goods industry. And I've even gone back, as Anthony knows, back to pharma from the consumer industry. And I feel like there's a lot of consumer learnings, especially in the supply chain area, that I was able to apply into my new pharma world, be it Celgene, now my current company.
So that's kind of interesting too. So I know you've had experience talking about this. You've had experience in business intelligence, sales planning, demand planning, which is a little different. But how did that help when you started looking at systems, building platforms for cell and gene in particular, as opposed to kind of the standard pharma stuff? But did that kind of help?
Yeah, I think having an appreciation for data and how challenging it is to have high quality of information, high quality of data, and how differently you need to think about data when you're creating a transactional system, and how that data is captured to create a transaction, if you will, versus using that data for analytical purposes or an analytical solution. And the quality needs to be much higher in the latter when you're trying to bring it together, especially from disparate systems, trying to bring it together and analyze it in concert to produce a particular insight. If the data isn't of the quality needed, the insights are typically not as valuable as you may have realized otherwise. So leveraging that expertise when I'm now implementing transactional systems in the cell and gene space, that's sort of in the back of my mind, knowing that we need to think sort of over the top, if you will, of data quality, ensuring that when we implement the transactional aspect of a particular system that may enable a business process, it's important that we are also thinking about the quality of that data and how it may be used even outside of the process by which this particular system was designed to support or enable, but where that data we know is going to be used elsewhere or to produce analytics and insights for some other stakeholder to do what they need to do.
Right, to make decisions or what have you. So you started doing that at Celgene, right? And that's a smaller.
Yeah, I started at Merck, was where I really got involved with the data space, data management, business intelligence, analytics, and that's, again, that was another example of when I moved over to Wyeth. I was hired because I had that data expertise, not necessarily consumer goods expertise, but I was able to transfer, switch industries, if you will. But then from Celgene, from Wyeth, was acquired by Pfizer. I went to a small consumer goods company called Pinnacle Foods. They were also acquired by another company, and I eventually ended up at Celgene. At Celgene, after I was there, I was hired in to lead their analytics team, what we call our data management group. So that was analytics or business intelligence, data integration, master data management, even our enterprise search utility was all was part of Celgene.
And that was, I mean, they were smaller back then, right? When you started, because I think they were about 9,000 when they got acquired. So it must have been small. So what's the difference like between working at a Pfizer? Because I think some people that might be listening are at a smaller company, and what do they need to kind of focus on when they're dealing with smaller enterprises, to get value out of what they're trying to do?
Yeah, well, be ready to wear multiple hats, do multiple things. I've certainly seen a stark contrast in when I've been working for a small company to some of the larger companies, especially when a larger company might be acquiring one of the small companies I work for. I remember I'd get into a room to explain an application, and there'd be like 6 or 8 other people from the larger company. They had their data architect and their data DBA and their integration person and their reporting person. And then we would have like 1 or 2 people that would represent all those areas, but they would have 6 or 8. It was kind of an interesting sort of, it was telling of how siloed maybe some of these larger companies might be. So yeah, I think it's a great thing to be in when you're in a small company, to be able to multitask or wear many hats or have develop expertise in multiple disciplines to meet what your business needs met through the technology that you might be deploying for that particular company.
Yeah.
You touched on a really interesting point, the differences between the larger company and the smaller company where the people are actually, siloed. From the system integration perspective, right? So like post-acquisition, so the big company comes in and buys a small company. Now they have to integrate the systems, and usually it comes down from the bigger company to the smaller company. Are there a lot of challenges when doing that, specifically because now you have all these people who are, wearing different hats, single person wearing different hats.
And you've done it a couple of ways, right? You've kind of gone from, in your Celgene experience, smaller and then bigger too, right? That's kind of interesting.
Yeah, I was with Wyeth. We got acquired by Pfizer. That was one experience. Then, to your point, Anthony, I was with Celgene and we acquired Juno. So we were the acquirer in that particular instance. And that's how I got involved with Cell and Gene, to be honest. And then Celgene got acquired by a larger company after that. So it's kind of gone both ways multiple times. But Armin, I guess to your point, it is from a system perspective and going through the integration. There, usually, in my experience, the companies that either acquired me or we acquired them, we went through. I felt like a bit of a fact-based analysis, especially if there were applications that did the same thing, and trying to assess, well, which of those applications was best suited to support the client company moving forward, and made the choice to stick with one versus the other. The cost savings is compelling to not keep everything around. So you go through an assessment to try to provide some cost savings to the now combined company moving forward.
Do you do that after the acquisition or while you're part of the due diligence?
So there's only so much, in my experience, there's only so much that we could share prior to day one of the actual acquisition. There were these data clean rooms, but I never felt like either we provided what was being asked of us or we received what was asking of the other company to the level of detail we needed. There was always a back and forth, and you often, once you pulled off the covers day one, you start to see a lot. You started to see a lot more of the relevant information you needed to make some of those decisions.
Is that?
I think going in, you start. Sorry, Anthony. Going into the acquisition, especially as the acquirer, you sort of have some preconceived thoughts on how you might consider integrating that new company into your applications you already have in place supporting your broader company. I think it might depend on the nature of the acquisition. In the case of acquiring a company like Juno, we knew we did not have cell therapy applications in place. We knew we didn't have anything to manage patients or anything for to support the patient operations team. So we knew out of the gate we would be accepting what Juno was already putting in place. But there's other instances where there's overlap, like an ERP system or other types of more general CRM type systems. I can see the acquiring company already thinking about how they would integrate the acquired company's information into their system.
I could also think of data challenges, right? So you talked about data, so data integration together, right? Systems, obviously, but also data. How does that play? Is there a lot of challenges in integrating data within?
I mean, sometimes depending on the data, obviously the nature of the data. In some instances, we actually kept it separate. So for like historical financial transactions, it stayed separate, and it was just kept in a bit of an archive. The acquired company's information was kept in a bit of an archive, but moving forward, we use our systems or the acquiring company systems moving forward. In the case of, I know one example was when I was with Celgene and I was managing the master data management utility, we were acquiring Juno. So we went through an exercise to see if there was additional either HCPs or other elements that they were mastering that they had that we didn't have. And for the most part, we were calling on the same types of doctors. So we had just about every piece of data, master data for any HCP they may have had already in our system. So we didn't have to go through a whole integration effort. It was just now adopting the identifiers that we were creating in our master data management system and integrating them into their particular systems. But there could be certainly broader challenges with other internally produced data in the acquiring company that might need to be integrated in, especially if you're keeping the system from the acquiring company.
Interesting.
That answers your question, Armin. Yeah.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
So Why do you think why do you think it's harder to get the information about the systems before day one? Is it just people are not, they feel uncomfortable to share, or?
Yeah, I mean, you're still two separate, and you're reminded every day you're still two separate companies. There's often a data clean room put in place between the two companies, so that a lot of that data is cleansed and masked or managed by a third party. Any types of interactions with the acquiring company is very restricted. There's only usually a certain number of people, a small group of folks that are interacting with the acquiring company. So I just feel like there's a lot of, at least the companies I've been with, the way our legal team has interpreted the legal aspects of the acquisition, there was a lot of restrictions put in place to how much you could collaborate prior to the actual closing of the deal.
Right. Right. Do you think the due diligence on the technology side, do you ever run into, oh man, I wish I had known this before?
Oh, sure. I mean, yeah.
What's the worst one you've seen?
I don't think there's anything where I would say, "Oh, geez, I wish we didn't acquire this company." If that's where you're meaning, it's just a matter of you could start to maybe plan better what you may have to deal with when the company gets acquired, and planning your resourcing, maybe get that on your project roadmap, if you will, that there's probably a bigger integration effort than maybe you originally anticipated until you sort of got into it and realized how much work there was involved. So, I mean, that would be the only sort of challenges I've seen, but there's nothing that would be like, oh, geez, I wish we didn't buy this company. That really never happened.
Yeah, usually technology is not going to.
No, usually that's not part of the broader due diligence anyway. When they're trying to acquire, okay, you got an ERP system, great, so do we. But you probably doesn't go past that much, much detail.
Do you think there are things that the smaller companies, because most of these smaller biotechs want to get acquired, right, by the larger companies? Yeah. Are there things that they can do that would be worthwhile to kind of, get things set so that migration effort or that acquisition is smoother, right? Or even during the due diligence process, something that they can do or be prepared for?
Yeah, I mean, it goes back to just running the business. Back to my point about having high quality of data as you're implementing systems. And nowadays you can most likely you're outsourcing to a third party the application, probably a commercially produced software. So the likelihood of you're developing it yourself and not developing it in a way that the data is of high quality is fairly low, I would think. But maybe just ensuring that you have, if you are using a third party cloud-based provider, what have you, you do have access to the data in a cost-effective way that you can archive off if needed and provide to the acquiring company via some means, whatever it may be, clean room or otherwise, because just having access to that data and being able to eventually integrate it to both your points earlier, integrate it into whatever system it may go into, to the extent you can provide as much of that upfront as possible, so the acquiring company can plan to have that integrated in the most efficient way if it needs to be.
Right.
That's probably the thing I would recommend.
And that's kind of if they're already commercial, right? But if they're in clinical, depending on what phase they're in, right, they may still be using a spreadsheet for some stuff, right? Which could be problematic.
Yeah,
from a data quality perspective.
Less to prepare and less maybe worry about integrating later, because the acquiring company may already have some robust systems in place that they could just plug your products into, as opposed to having to integrate systems.
Yeah. So what are you finding kind of out there now in terms of trends from either a software perspective or a systems perspective? Are you seeing I know processes are evolving all the time, right? Because this is still such an early stage.
Yeah, well, and that's the point. That's a great point. It's still such a very dynamic industry, and the processes are evolving in a good way to get more efficient, more effective. When we got involved with this, there wasn't a lot of commercial off-the-shelf available packages for us to leverage. So And as I mentioned, we inherited a lot of what was already started at Juno. And they had been customizing some cloud-based platforms to essentially meet their specific need for the patient treatment process from enrollment all the way through treatment for autologous products. So nowadays, though, so that was probably 5 years or so ago whenever I started getting involved with it and when we acquired Juno. But I'm starting to see some additional, and we continue to look at them, but additional products that are starting to emerge, that are being offered, that are available. Some of them aren't maybe at the robustness a large company with multiple cell therapy products launched in multiple markets, being manufactured in multiple manufacturing facilities, could just take advantage of just yet. But I think some of them look pretty good, especially if you're a company with one product trying to get marketed in one country and perhaps have one manufacturing facility or even a CMO that manufactures your product. I could see some of these tools that are emerging could be quite effective. Because the one challenge that many smaller companies may have is, since we had to build the software custom and we're continuing to evolve it with the changing business, it can be a bit costly to do so.
Yeah.
That's where sort of the rub is. In order to keep up with this amazing industry, and mind you, these products are doing incredible things for some terrible diseases. However, it's changing rapidly, and the systems are so incredibly involved in enabling that patient treatment process that the systems need to evolve as rapidly as the business processes. So that's where the challenge comes in. We're continuing to, and that's part of maybe why we haven't adopted a commercial software per se. We felt like having that control to adopt our systems as rapidly as we could to meet that changing business dynamic was maybe a value add or a competitive advantage for us at the time. But also we had the sort of the wherewithal to be able to afford to do that.
Right.
A smaller company may not have may not be able to afford to be as customized as we are with the large development team that we have that can do that rapidly.
Right. Well, one of the things that I've noticed, and I think kind of the paradigm that we've always looked at, is because it is so early on and because things change so much, what I'm finding is, so it's not like ERP, right? Or even CRM at this point, where, this process, accounting has been around for a very long time, right? And it doesn't change that rapidly. But let's say, if, like you said, you're in an autologous therapy, and one day you have this plasmid manufacturer, and the next day the business decides, we're going to swap these guys out, or we're going to swap couriers out, or whatever. And the ability to do that quickly and still have it automated, is not easy. And I think I spent time in big software, right? So for a long time, and I think that mentality of how we used to build software for these types of enterprise applications doesn't fit quite yet, because we're not mature enough in this industry.
Yeah, in your experience, Anthony, were you building software for an industry that is evolving, as basically was invented in the last 5 years?
No, I was at Oracle for like 8 years, right? I did payment engine and other stuff like that.
That's the challenge, that just how dynamic it is for many of us that maybe have worked in software or even worked in a large pharmaceutical company. And then they purchased this small little cell therapy component, and realizing how different that now very dynamic make to order business is from what they may have been used to, and having to try to leverage the systems and teams that supported the traditional pharmaceutical products in the cell therapy space it's a bit of a challenge. There's a bit of a learning curve to come up to speed on the nuance of cell therapy and the dynamic nature, really, of what the cell therapy product may need in your company.
Well, yeah, and let's say you spend 6 months trying to build for a particular therapy that's in clinical trial, and then the science comes out and says, you know what, we're going to actually pivot. And you're like, oh, wow. Wait a second. Right. I'm not prepared quite to, I can't pivot quite that fast from a technology perspective. So that's kind of our, approach to things, is to see how we can do this so you can pivot faster, right? The ability to do that. Do you think things are kind of headed in are you seeing more allogeneic trends out there just because of, you know, the time it takes to make the other products, and the sometimes the patients aren't, you know, necessarily healthy enough to provide enough material to.
I mean, there's certainly companies I've worked for are trying to move their aloe product forward, and others are as well for all the reasons you cited. But we know autologous has been proven to be effective and does what it needs to do, and there is commercially available aloe product just yet, to my knowledge, that can that we've been able to essentially prove to be as effective and safe as some of the autologous products.
Yeah, no, that's definitely true. Well, Art, I mean, it's great. I really appreciate you spending time with us today. I mean, I got a lot of good insights, and you're always a pleasure to talk with. So I really appreciate it today. So thanks again.
Thanks.
And have a good rest of your week and a great weekend. And we'll talk soon.
All right. Take care.
Thanks. Bye. Wow, I actually thought that was really cool. I really liked Art's diverse background. I think it really means a lot. You know, you get different perspectives and some creative thinking there when that happens.
Absolutely. Yeah, and specifically with the data integration between different companies and acquisitions and smaller companies versus larger companies, it makes a big difference.
Yeah, and his point about how you know, the due diligence and how you can make it easier to get acquired and assimilate into the acquiring company if you kind of excuse me, look at your processes and systems and kind of get those set up kind of correctly from the beginning is a big leap forward. So
yeah,
I thought it was great. Really enjoyed it. He's a cool guy. So
absolutely.
All right, man. Another one in the books. We'll talk soon. Have a good rest of your day and a good weekend.
You
too.
too.
Later. All right.
Talk to you later. Bye.
Subscribe for more insights from leading CGT experts.